Imagine this. You awaken before dawn, the hush of the world pressing against your eyelids like a question you can't yet answer. There is a palpable tension beneath the stillness, an almost electric hum that seems to vibrate through your bones. You sit up in bed, heart thudding, and the room feels both too small and impossibly vast, as though your life's entire narrative is suspended in the space between shadows and streetlight. Something in you shifts, a quiet awareness stirring. Time has been moving relentlessly, but you have not. How did you arrive at this threshold, where every familiar landmark of relationships, routine suddenly seems to tremble on its foundations? You'll remember the days when ambition drove you forward, the promotions, the late nights, the steady pulse of youth rippling with promise. And yet now, standing at the cusp of 40, you feel an undercurrent of disquiet, as if decades of unexamined choices have led you here, to a precipice that both beckons and terrifies. Why is it that the very moment society deems your life settled, your soul insists on shaking the foundations? Isn't 40 supposed to be a plateau? A comfortable summit from which you survey the terrain you've conquered? And yet, instead of clarity, you encounter dissonance, the sudden urge to question everything you've built, the gnawing sense that the person you've been is no longer who you must become. What hidden mainspring has snapped, releasing a tidal wave of existential doubt? You asked yourself, is it possible that life truly begins only once the first half has been lived? Could it be that the milestones you pursued, titles, accolades, material security, were mere scaffolding erected to shield you from confronting the deeper abyss of your own psyche? And if so, what awaits you on the far side of this rupture? Feel the paradox. The very moment your body bears the marks of timelines around eyes, a slowing metabolism, the faint ache of joints you sense, a stirring liberation, as though aging itself is a sacrament, a rite that frees you from the illusions of invincibility. How strange that the loss of presumed youth should ignite an urgency to discover what you've never dared to seek. Yet beneath this urgency lies a quieter dread, the fear that questioning now is too late, that 40 is the point where ambition turns to regret, and daring to leap forward becomes an act of desperation. Do you risk everything you've carefully assembled, your reputation, your comfort, your very sense of self to chase a deeper truth? Or do you settle into the middle-age lull, convincing yourself that wisdom comes in measured increments, not in sudden awakenings? Imagine the weight of these unspoken tensions settling on your shoulders as you step out into the pre-dawn world. The streets are empty, yet the air throbs with possibility. A street lamp flickers, casting elongated shadows that dance like silent witnesses to your inner turmoil. You pause at a crossroads. The neighborhood you know like the back of your hand rendered alien under the contrast's glare of night. Which way forward? Which way back? And if there is no going back, what awaits beyond the point of no return? Perhaps you sense you are not alone in this stirring of the soul. Great minds throughout history have whispered of such a turning, Nietzsche's bold proclamation that one must still have chaos within to give birth to a dancing star. Jung's conviction that the second half of life arrives only when the first half has been lived in fullness and often in ignorance of the self. Have these luminaries merely pronounced what you now live? What if this moment is not a crisis, but a summons, a call to step beyond the narratives written for you by childhood dreams, cultural expectations, and the unrelenting logic of productivity? What if the ache in your bones is not a sign of decline, but the drumbeat of a new beginning? And yet, how does one answer a summons so profound when the world around you expects certainties, not questions? You inhale the cool air, tasting both the remnants of sleep and the thrill of unfolding potential. The horizon, a sliver of pale light, hints at dawn, but you cannot see what lies beyond the rooftop edge. You stand at the edge of yourself, teetering between comfort and transformation, the known and the utterly unknown. And so, you return home with a single, urgent question echoing through your mind. What hidden force has propelled you here, to the point where life only seems to begin? What contours of the soul have remained unseen, waiting through decades of busyness to reveal themselves at this precise hour? The answer you sense will reshape everything, but to grasp it, you must first venture into the depths. In the next moment, as the first rays of sunrise breach the horizon, you will step across an invisible threshold. But what darkness will you leave behind, and what light will guide you forward? You return from that pre-dawn crossroads, with the horizon's first light still shimmering on the edge of possibility. Yet beneath the promise of dawn, a darker choreography unfolds, an invisible engine that has guided your every step, whispered in your ear, and shaped your life in ways you never suspected. This is the hidden problem. The forces of psyche, philosophy, and society colluding to keep you tethered to a story written long before you knew your own name. Throughout your life, you've worn masks, personas shaped by expectation and aspiration. Jung taught that the persona is a social facade, constructed to earn acceptance and applause. But for every mask that fits neatly, there is a shadow lurking in the recesses of your unconscious undesirable traits, repressed desires, and unacknowledged fears. Have you ever felt a sudden surge of anger at a minor slight, or an inexplicable craving that seems to contradict your carefully cultivated image? That is your shadow pressing against the cracks of your persona, begging for recognition. Why do you hide? Because society rewards the polished, the productive, the perpetually smiling achiever. From childhood, you absorbed a narrative that equates worth with accomplishment. Good grades, a prestigious university, a stable career path, these became the milestones that marked success. Nietzsche's will to power urged you to assert yourself, to climb, to dominate. Yet that very climb often required the suppression of your deeper longings, the yearning for authenticity, for creative play, for a life lived in alignment with your innermost truth. Arthur Schopenhauer spoke of the will, an irrational force driving existence, forever unsatisfied. That endless striving became your engine, propelling you forward through early adulthood in a blur of promotions, social rituals, and self-improvement fads. But the more you achieved, the more hollow the victories felt. Why does success taste like sand slipping through your fingers? Because the will never rests, it demands more, always more, until the soul cries out for respite. In the chatter of your mind, you may hear echoes of Aldous Huxley's warnings that modern culture lures us into a brave new world of distraction, consumption, and trivial pleasures. Screens glow brighter than stars, algorithms anticipate your every desire, and dopamine hooks keep you tethered to superficial highs. You scroll through a curated parade of other people's highlight reels, and the comparison trap tightens around your chest. Is this really living, or merely surviving in a digital cage? Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialism reveals another layer: the crushing freedom of choice. You are condemned to choose, to define yourself in every moment, yet the weight of possibility can paralyze. Do you pursue passion or security, conform or rebel, speak your truth or maintain the peace? Every decision fractures your being, and the fear of making the wrong choice can become a prison of inertia. How many roads have you left untaken because the shadows of doubt whispered, "Better safe than sorry"? Viktor Frankl, who found meaning amid the horrors of the Holocaust, asserted that human beings crave significance above all. Yet modern life often defers meaning to retirement or the someday when. Someday I'll travel. Someday I'll write that book. Someday I'll discover who I really am. By the time someday arrives, years, decades have slipped away. The existential vacuum widens, a yawning chasm between the life you live and the life you long for. Invisible forces of culture amplify this vacuum. From adolescence onward, you've been fed a narrative of linear progress. Child education, career, marriage, retirement, a neat arc, like a well-timed movie. But lives are not plots authored by an omniscient screenwriter. They are messy, non-linear, unscripted. And when you reach 40, when the societal script purports that you should be in mid-career, raising teenagers, perhaps supporting aging parents, you find that life seldom adheres to the tidy act breaks. What happens when you awaken at 40 with the ghost of youthful dreams flickering in your mind? The hidden problem reveals itself, the collision of external narratives with the internal self, mediated by the unconscious. It takes decades for this collision to generate enough friction for you to feel the heat. Midlife becomes a crucible, not because time is running out, but because the dissonance between who you are expected to be and who you are destined to become becomes unbearable. Consider the collective unconscious that Jung envisioned, a shared reservoir of archetypes and symbols that shape human experience across cultures. The midlife crisis archetype emerges here not but as a universal pattern. The hero who, weary from his quest, realizes that the true journey lies not in conquering the world but in descending into the depths of his own soul. You may feel the pull of that descent. Now, a call to explore the hidden chambers of your psyche. but cultural taboos cast this inward turn as self-indulgent or even irresponsible. Get back to work, the world demands. Keep producing. And so you compartmentalize. You schedule therapy sessions like appointments to the mechanic, fix the trouble spots, then get back on the highway. You dabble in mindfulness apps, weekend retreats, self-help books, but return to the treadmill of tasks as though nothing has changed. The self remains divided, the willing apprentice of society and the unloved child of your own deeper truth. What if the hidden problem is this very division, the schism between persona and shadow, between will and meaning, between social narrative and inner calling? What if your very defenses against anxiety, achievement, consumption, distraction are the chains that bind you to an inauthentic life? The philosophical roots run deeper still. Schopenhauer's pessimism reminds you that suffering is built into the human condition. Striving to avoid it only deepens the anguish. Nietzsche's call to embrace life, SKS, hints that only by dancing with uncertainty can you be reborn. Frankel's search for meaning insists that purpose can be found in any circumstance. You've been taught to look for it in distant horizons, not within the quiet moments of your own heart. Society's hidden curriculum declares that time is scarce, youth is sacred, and aging is decline. But within those very patterns lies a rupture, the invitation to redefine what aging means. Jung proposed that the second half of life demands a different orientation, not outward ambition, but inward integration. The refusal to heed this invitation traps you in what Jung called tertiary life, a life prolonged in youthfulness but devoid of depth. You can sense the toll. Relationships grown stagnant, creativity fated to flicker out, passions deferred indefinitely. The unconscious whispers through dreams vivid landscapes of falling, drowning, or fleeing, each one a message. The path you're on leads away from the self. Your soul demands recognition, but you've been taught to mistrust your own yearnings. This hidden problem has amassed strength over decades, woven into your neural pathways, sedimented in bone and sinew. It is the architecture of your habitual mind, the conditioned reflexes to react rather than respond. Yet its power derives entirely from your unaware. What might happen if you shone the light of conscious attention into these shadowed chambers? What if you recognized that the fears fueling your endless striving were echoes of childhood insecurities, not prophecies of failure? Before you can break free, you must name the foe. It is not time, not aging, not society, but the unexamined psycholabyrinth of persona, shadow, will, and narrative. And yet, within this labyrinth, lies the thread of Ariadne, your capacity for self-reflection, symbolized by Jung's process of the journey inward is the path out of the maze. Now, with the hidden problem exposed, the question becomes, how do you navigate this labyrinth? How do you dismantle the persona's defenses, honor the shadow, and transmute relentless striving into purposeful becoming? The answers lie at the crossroads of psychology and philosophy, where thought meets feeling, theory meets lived experience, and the next phase of this journey beckons. You step deeper into that winding labyrinth of your psyche, and suddenly you notice the subtle but relentless ways it has been steering your life. These are the unseen consequences, the silent architectures that shape your reality without consent or awareness. In the quiet moments when a familiar anxiety coils in your chest, when a sudden rush of envy flares at a colleague's success, you feel the ripple effects of unexamined forces. Yet these ripples are only the surface disturbance of a deeper current, one that has carved channels through your mind, spirit, and relationships, often without leaving a trace you can name. Observe how cognitive biases, those mental shortcuts you've long relied upon, function like invisible scripts. Confirmation bias whispers only what you wish to hear, filtering experiences into neat compartments that confirm your self-justifications. You cling to beliefs that protect your fragile sense of self-believing you're a competent professional, a loving partner, a person of good intentions, while sidelining evidence to the contrary. When mistakes happen, you blame external factors, a difficult boss, an unfair system, or simple bad luck. Rarely do you pause to inspect how you, too, may have sown the seeds of your own discontent. See also the hedonic treadmill at work. Every triumph, every acquisition, every relationship milestone brings a fleeting surge of satisfaction, followed inevitably by adaptation. A new car, a promotion, a romantic high, they glimmer brilliantly, but their radiance fades quickly, leaving you once more scanning the horizon for the next novelty. The consequence: restlessness becomes your default state, a low-grade ache whispering that the real prize is always out of reach. Unaware, you chase distractions, social media feeds, weekend getaways, self-help programs, each promising solace but delivering only another promise deferred. Neurological insights reveal even more insidious patterns. Mirror neurons fire as you observe others, causing you to unconsciously mimic their emotions and body language. In a world saturated by digital images of success, beauty, and happiness, you involuntarily absorb the affective states of strangers scrolling past on your screen. A curated Instagram post triggers envy, a viral video sparks anxiety, and before you know it, your mood has become someone else's composition. You are entangled in a global emotional web, yet you sense only your own disquiet, attributing it to personal failure rather than to the contagion of collective neurosis. Cultural conditioning plays its hand as well, shaping your desires long before you learn to question them. From childhood, you are fed the storyline of progress. Education leads to a career, which leads to a family, which leads to respectability. These markers become milestones you pursue with mechanical determination. Each box checked reinforces the narrative that you are on course. But what if the narrative itself is bankrupt? What if the milestones you so feverishly chase no longer correspond to genuine fulfillment? By midlife, the consequences emerge as a gnawing sense of vertigo. You've aligned your life to a script composed by others, and now you wonder whether you've been living someone else's dream. Relationships bear the brunt of this drift. When your psyche is governed by unexamined drives, your interactions become transactional. You partner not from a place of mutual exploration but from a desire to fill emptiness. Friendships form around shared status or interests that sustain your persona, rather than around the mutual exchange of vulnerability. When conflicts arise, an offhand remark, a forgotten promise, you react defensively, lashing out or withdrawing, blind to the deeper wounds being triggered. The consequence is a landscape of half-lived connections, relationships that look robust on the surface, but crumble under the weight of unspoken resentments and unmet needs. At work, the unseen consequences manifest as burnout and disillusionment. You throw yourself into projects, convinced that achievement will anchor your worth. Yet every success only ratchets up expectations, your own and those of others. The edge of exhaustion becomes so familiar that you mistake it for purpose. When a performance review goes poorly, you spiral into self-doubt. When praise arrives, you worry it's a fluke. This oscillation between imposter syndrome and hubris is not a personal failing but an inevitable outcome of basing identity on external validation. The toll is anxiety disorders, sleepless nights, and a creeping sense that your talents may be squandered in pursuits that lack true significance. In quieter realms or in a life, the price is invisibility. Dreams, once vivid and daring, recede like tidal pools at low water. You forget the wild ideas that once stirred your blood, painting murals, writing poetry, learning an obscure language. Instead, you fill your mind with practical concerns, bills, schedules, errands. The consequence is a hardened shell around your creative core, a barrier that dulls the spark of imagination and reduces possibility to probability. You've become a spectator of your own life, watching from behind a glass wall, unable to reach through and seize the raw material of your own becoming. And what of the spirit? For many, religion or spirituality is a compass in the dark, but when faith is reduced to ritual rather than relationship, its guiding star turns to dull Copernican spin. You perform the motions on their services, prayers, meditations, yet feel no encounter with numinous presence. The consequence is spiritual aridity, a thirst with no clear object, a longing for transcendence you can't articulate. You sense that something transcendent might exist, but societal norms have taught you to relegate such longings to weekend retreats or vacation pilgrimages, rather than integrating them into the fabric of daily life. These unseen consequences converge by midlife, creating what Jung called a great disturbance of the soul. You may experience it as a crisis, insomnia, panic attacks, inexplicable rage, or as a slow bleed, the gradual fading of interest, the creeping despair that each year feels lighter than the last. Perhaps you'd find yourself staring at old photographs, wondering, is this really all there was? Or you awaken in the pre-dawn hours, heart racing, with no clear any, but an overwhelming feeling of urgency stirs. You realize that the opposite of examination is extinction. If you continue on automatic pilot, The life you live at 50 will be a mere echo of the one you could have lived at 40. Yet facing these hidden consequences demands more than willpower. It demands radical honesty, the courage to dismantle the persona's defenses, to delve into the unconscious and retrieve its exiled parts. It requires learning to bear the tension between what is and what could be, without retreating into distraction or denial. Even now, you might feel the first tremors of that bearing. A journal lies gathering dust on your nightstand. A half-forgotten book on dreams beckons from your shelf. Your feet carry you past a community center hosting a philosophy workshop you intended to attend. Each small signal is an invitation to stop running, to pause at the threshold, to say, "I will look." The stakes are nothing less than your own becoming. This labyrinth doesn't yield its secrets to half-hearted glances. It demands sustained attention, the willingness to sit with discomfort, to turn toward the shadows rather than flee. The unseen consequences, biases, the habits, the unspoken narratives will resist, pulling you back into the rhythms of ease and avoidance. Yet every moment you choose awareness over acquiescence, you reclaim a fragment of yourself from oblivion. Soon, you will confront the possibility that these hidden forces can be transmuted. You will glimpse that the very biases that imprison you can become tools of insight, that the restless striving can be redirected towards soulful purpose, that the hunger for novelty can give way to an appreciation of presence. But before that turning, you must fully reckon with the toll paid, the loveless partnerships, the wasted creativity, the seasons of silent despair. Only by illuminating the darkness can you discover the thread of light leading onward. And so, with a quiet resolve stirring in your chest, you prepare to step beyond observation into action. You acknowledge that knowing is not enough, you must also do. The path ahead will demand perseverance, ritual, and above all, compassion for yourself in your most fractured moments. The next leap will not be easy, but the first step is clear: to refuse the comfort of ignorance, and to embrace the unfolding mystery of your own becoming. You stand at the edge of a clearing in a dense forest of your own, making brambles of habit, towering oaks of expectation, vines of distraction curling around your ankles. The air tastes of damp earth and possibility. Somewhere ahead, you hear the low hum of a waterfall, the pulse of a life force you've almost forgotten. In that moment, you sense a fissure opening in the ground beneath you, as though the earth itself is urging you to leap, to shatter the patterns that have held you captive. What if the rebellion you need is not an overthrow of external systems, but a radical insurrection within your own psyche? What if breaking free means reframing failure as feedback, fear as fuel, and the unknown as your truest ally? This is your call to arms, a revolt against the internal tyrant that has demanded compliance, sameness, and safety at the expense of your deepest yearnings. Begin with a simple act of defiance. Reclaim your mornings. Civilization has taught you to greet the dawn with urgency, emails, meetings, notifications. Instead, imagine waking before expectation arrives. Feel the first rays of sunlight sketching patterns on your walls. Before the world's demands press in, open a journal and address your own inner counsel. What stirrings did you dream last night? Which unvoiced aspiration pulses beneath your ribs? In the silence you create, you grant voice to your raw, unfiltered self, long silenced by the roar of societal applause. Consider the ancient Stoics, those rebels against emotional slavery. Marcus Aurelius counseled that you have power over your mind, not outside events. You might recoil at such austerity: no cocktails at brunch, no spontaneous road trips. Yet the rebellion here is subtler, choosing your response rather than reacting. When irritation flares at a colleague's flippant remark, pause, breathe. Witness the sensation as though it belongs to someone else. In that gap, you reclaim sovereignty over your emotional life, dismantling the reactive chains of habit. Now turn to history's bold pioneers who shattered the status quo. In the 1920s, Carl Jung embarked on his Red Book experiments, dialoguing with his own unconscious visions, even at the cost of professional censure. He ventured past the bounds of clinical orthodoxy into the wilderness of dreams and archetypes and audacious. What if you, too, kept a red book of your inner illuminations? Sketch your dreams, record the voices that echo in the silent chambers of your mind. Dare to personify your fears and desires. By giving them shape, you begin to integrate them. On another shore, Simone de Beauvoir refused the prescribed life of wife and mother in mid-century France, choosing instead the uncertainties of Parisian and the rigors of philosophical inquiry. Her rebellion was not reckless abandonment, but a deliberate alignment with her truth. She demonstrated that the freedom to define oneself outweighs the comforts of conventional acceptance. What scripts have you accepted without audition? Whose voice in your head still dictates your worth? Challenge them as de Beauvoir challenged Herrera's gender codes. But rebellion is not mere it demands new structures to sustain the liberated spirit. Design a daily ritual that anchors you in your reclaimed identity. Perhaps it is a midday walk where you name 3 things you truly desire: creative exploration, authentic connection, meaningful work. Or an evening practice of crafting a small poem, a simple recipe, or planting a seed, an embodiment of growth. Through ritual, you cultivate a sacred container for your renaissance, so that the emerging self has both freedom and form. Mindset shift. Embrace the paradox that vulnerability is your greatest strength. Brown's research shows that courage blossoms when you allow yourself to be seen, to risk rejection for the sake of authenticity. Reach out to a friend with a confession, a small one at first. I feel stuck in my career and afraid I'll be judged for it. Notice how the tremor in your voice may crack open a deeper connection. You dismantle the fortress of persona brick by brick when you admit your fish. Equally counterintuitive is the power of strategic inaction. The Japanese concept of ma celebrates the space between events, the pregnant pause that gives form to meaning. You've been taught that time must be filled, productivity stacked like trophies. Instead, learn to linger in the void. Schedule white space in your calendar, hours reserved for wandering thoughts, aimless doodling, or staring at the sky. In these pauses, the unconscious weaves associations, and creative solutions often emerge when you least expect them. Draw inspiration from Viktor Frankl's insistence that even in the darkest camps, one retains the freedom to choose one's attitude. You are not being asked to endure literal horrors, but the day-to-day grind can feel like a prison of your own making. Confront it by adopting a posture of meaning-seeking. When you face a tedious task, endless reports, bureaucratic red tape, ask, how can this serve a larger purpose? Perhaps drafting that proposal is the stepping stone to a project that ignites your passion. By reframing drudgery as service, you hijack obligation and transform it into an act of will. Now, imagine forging alliances with fellow rebels. Seek out a cohort of kindred spirits. Colleagues disillusioned with climbing the corporate ladder, neighbors experimenting with off-grid living, artists who've dropped out to drop in. Form a council of dissent, a monthly gathering to share breakthroughs, setbacks, and wild ideas. Accountability takes on new meaning when it becomes mutual support for uncharted exploration. Perhaps the most radical shift is to redefine success, not as accumulation but as depth. In an essay, poet Mary Oliver asks, "What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Let that question be your North Star. Measure days not by how many tasks you tick off, but by how many moments you felt alive, immersed in wonder, pierced by insight, aflame with connection. Create a fulfillment ledger instead of a to-do list. Note the times you laughed until you wept, the conversations that stirred your soul, the solitary hikes where the forest whispered secrets. This rebellion will summon resistance, anxiety will spike, your inner critic will howl, loved ones may question your sanity. But recall Jung's words, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Every barrier you confront is a gate to deeper freedom. When self-doubt rises, speak back, I am the author of my life, not a character in someone else's script. When your body aches with unaccustomed effort, morning journaling, new rituals remind yourself that growth often feels uncomfortable. As you step from the clearing into the unknown, you carry a torch lit by centuries of fearless seekers. You have seen the mechanisms of your entrapment and now wield the tools of liberation. Conscious attention, ritual, reframing, community, and the sacred pause. The forest no longer feels imprisoning. It is a living map of your own psyche, and you hold the compass. Feel the rumble of the waterfall growing louder, the cascade of potential you've awakened. Each droplet is an idea, a longing, a possibility unleashed. The rebellion is not a one-time coup, but a way of being, a continuous choice to honor your truth, above comfort to dance with paradox. Instead of dissolving into certainty, to live boldly in the fertile tension between known and unknown. Ahead, the waterfall crashes into a hidden pool. Its surface glimmers with reflections of your past selves and whispers of the person you are becoming. Without hesitation, you step forward into the flow, into the reclamation, into the life that begins when you break free. Now you stand at the edge of the hidden pool beneath that thunderous waterfall, drenched in mist and anticipation. The roar in your ears is the voice of every possibility you've ever buried, every yearnings you've silenced. In this moment, the veil between who you were and who you are becoming quivers and falls away. Life truly begins at 40, not because your youth has expired, but because you have at last arrived at the singular truth that has eluded you all your days. Feel the cool water at your fingertips, slick and alive. It invites you to plunge, to let the torrent wash away the last vestiges of old stories. You realize now, the self you believed you were encarned to achievements, defined by roles, shackled to shoulds, was never your truest essence. It was a provisional construct, a garment stitched from other people's expectations. And now, standing naked before your own becoming, you sense a vast, uncharted landscape unfurling within. Ask yourself, what if identity is not a fixed point but a river, constantly reshaping its banks? Jung called this process individuation, pilgrimage toward wholeness, the integration of shadow, anima, and archetype. You have glimpsed these depths in dreams and reflections, in the tremors of rebellion and the hush of white space rituals. But the ultimate truth is this: you are both the river and the traveler, the sculptor and the clay. As the waterfall spray settles on your skin, you realize that your wounds, your failures, your losses were not detours but each heartbreak opened a cavern of empathy. Each misstep revealed a hidden strength. Every plateau forced you to pivot and discover new terrain. Instead of sealing you off, each scar has become a conduit for connection to yourself, to others, to the numinous beyond words. In this realization, the paradox dissolves. Decline is rebirth. Chaos is creative. Endings are beginnings. The same inexorable flow of time that carved lines in your face also etched channels for wisdom to pour through. The future no longer demands your fear. It beckons as an ally. You carry within you the unknowable potential of spring bursting through winter's ice, of a seed cracking open after years of dormancy. Look back for a moment. See the younger selves, each marched forward by duty, by fear, by the hunger for approval. Yet each step was necessary in education in what does not serve, what does not endure. Without those experiences, the soul would have nothing to sift from the sand. You would still be chasing mirages rather than distilling your own gold. Now look forward. Imagine a life unbound by the illusion of completion, a life in which you remain a student of wonder, a pilgrim in your own psyche. You no longer ask, "Who am I?" as though identity were a commodity to be procured. Instead, you ask, "How am I becoming?" celebrating the flux, the creative tension, the interplay of light and shadow in every breath. In this new paradigm, purpose is not a distant summit to conquer, but the music that arises when action and meaning harmonize. You may still write that book, start that business, fall in love anew, but these endeavors are fueled not by obligation or fear, but by the joy of aligning each moment with your deepest truth. Work becomes worship, relationships become mirrors of soul, and each sunrise greets you as an opportunity to dance on the edge of the infinite. The hidden pool ripples at your feet, reflecting 1,000 versions of yourself, sometimes triumphant, sometimes wounded, always becoming. You understand now that the self is a mosaic of moments, each impermanent shard speaking a facet of the whole. To be fractured is to be human. To breathe into the fractures is to illuminate the mystery. And so, you step into the pool. The cold shock anchors you in the present, each heartbeat echoing like a drum in a forgotten temple. Beneath the surface lies the stillness of the unconscious, holding treasures you can't yet name. You dive, allowing gravity and water to enfold you, trusting that surrender is not defeat, but the portal to true freedom. When you emerge, gasping, the world seems both the same and utterly transformed. Every leaf glistens with possibility. Every breath feels consecrated. The waterfall's roar is now a benediction, reminding you that life moves through cycles of release and renewal. You are not a solitary drop lost in the torrent, but part of the very stream that carves canyons and nourishes valleys. In the days to come, this revelation will infuse everything: the way you speak, the way you touch, the way you choose. You'll no longer measure success in trophies or titles, but in moments of absolute presence when you meet another soul's gaze and know you're seen. When you tread unfamiliar paths with curiosity, when you allow laughter to rise, unbidden, from a place of sacred delight. Remember this moment at the pool as your true birth. The calendar will mark your 40th year as the moment of biological passage, but your spirit has crossed its own Rubicon here and now. What was once hidden in shadow is now held in the incandescent light of awareness. You carry within you the ultimate truth, that life is the art of becoming, an eternal unfolding that begins anew whenever you heed the call of the depths. Carry this truth forward as a torch in the dark. Let it guide you through seasons of abundance and seasons of drought. When doubt creeps in, recall the exhilarating plunge into the hidden pool and feel the pulse of your own emergence. You are, and will always be, a work in progress, ongoing masterpiece shaped by the alchemy of experience, reflection, and love. So go forth into the next chapter, unafraid of the blank page, the unscripted moment, the whispering unknown. For now, you know, life truly begins at 40. At the moment you choose to let go of old stories and become the artist of your own soul. And this, you realize, is only the beginning.